You just finished what you thought was a perfectly healthy meal. You think you've done it all perfect and right, but somehow you feel a little bit off. You feel like it isn't hitting your body the way that it should, and you kind of feel sluggish about it. Well, that's because the biggest mistake that you made wasn't during that meal at all. The biggest mistake that you made was what you didn't do hours before. What we eat at 9 a.m. is going to affect the meal that we eat at 2 p.m. So in this video, I'm going to give you the tools. I'm going to give you the playbook to time your meals and sequence your meals properly. And I promise it's not going to be overwhelming. I'm going to simplify it into really just 3 direct tools that you can follow. And there's a lot of science, and I'm going to break down some of that science, but you don't even need to worry about remembering all the science. I just put it there so that you can learn and understand the mechanisms while I give you these 3 tools. Now, before we get into that, I put a link down below for Thrive Market. This is what I use to get a lot of my pantry staples, a lot of my groceries, really. And that's a 30% off discount link. So you get 30% off your entire first grocery order. So if you're trying to overhaul your diet, you're trying to change some things, it's a great place to start because they vet all of their products. So the ingredients that are coming onto their digital shelves, so to speak, these are all good, clean ingredients that don't have hidden, nasty things in them. So it makes it so you can just trust, and it kind of takes the pain out of it. But you also get a free gift when you use that link down below. So 30% off your entire first grocery order and a free gift. So check them out, top line of the description underneath this video. Why is what you eat at 9 a.m. so potentially damaging to what you eat at 2 p.m.? Well, I mean, to have some fun with it, it was back in 1988 when this was first discovered. So scientists were doing some work and they found that, hey, well, what people eat in the evening time actually affects the blood sugar from what they eat the next day. And I know that sounds like, my gosh, I have to keep track of so much, but it's not about that. It's about having these tools in your toolbox. So if you come to it, like tool number 1 is actually just managing the types of carbohydrates that you have earlier in the day. Okay, that's not a big pill to swallow, right? I'm not asking you to say, okay, I need to modulate my type of carbs all day throughout the day. I'm saying if you're gonna have a good amount of carbs, if you're gonna do something like that, if you can control the types of carbs you have in the morning, it does impact your insulin resistance or your insulin sensitivity the remainder of the day. Let me back up and say what I've experienced is like those days that I have like a cheat meal or I have a big dessert, I'm ravenously hungry the next day. And that is a blood sugar effect. What I ate the night before affected my appetite, it affected everything that I ate the next day, right? So what we have to look at, and what these researchers found, is that when subjects ate, in this particular case, like a lower glycemic whole grain type meal in the evening time, it made it so that when they had breakfast, they didn't have a big glucose spike. There was a study that was published in the journal Nutrition Metabolism, and this particular one was interesting because it did look at whole grains and it looked at legumes. For example, what they found is that when subjects had lentils, they would have a 38% decrease in their glucose spike at the next meal. So hypothetically, if you had lentils at breakfast, it could reduce your glucose by 38% at lunch. Strangely though, much of this has to do with free fatty acids, which is kind of interesting. When you go a long period of time without food, your body starts to release these free fatty acids. And generally speaking, this is a super good thing. Okay, these free fatty acids are providing your body with fuel and you're burning fat in the process. But the downside is that it makes it so that when you do eat carbohydrates after a long period of time with no food, you might be a little less insulin sensitive because those fats that are in the bloodstream actually prevent some of the carbs from getting into the cell itself. So once you actually eat something, those free fatty acids go down and it changes the entire landscape of how food responds in your body. So you wouldn't want to wake up in the morning and eat a bunch of cheesecake or something, because then you're setting yourself up for all kinds of weird metabolic stress throughout the rest of the day. So there was a study that was published in Diabetes Care, and they found that when subjects had like a little bit of yogurt prior to their breakfast, it changed everything with their lunch. What it did is it increased their insulin sensitivity and they had much less of a glucose spike. But yogurt isn't a starchy carb. Yogurt isn't a grain. For the most part, yogurt is fat and protein and some calcium, right? There's not a lot to it. So that takes us to our next point, is being able to have a protein preload. Now, some of us have heard of protein preloads as like eating your protein first when you're looking at a meal. For example, you got your plate in front of you, you've got your chicken, you've got your broccoli, you've got your rice. Let's just say that. Eat your chicken first. And that's a great rule, but that's not what I'm talking about as a protein preload. I'm talking about a protein preload for the day. Have your protein in the morning. Consolidate as much of your protein as you possibly can to the morning, not just because there's a myriad of reasons why that's good. I mean, obviously you hit your protein goals easier, there's satiety, there's all the good things, but it changes massively the landscape of your metabolism throughout the rest of the day. Having a bunch of protein with breakfast changes how your body responds to your carbs at lunch, and even changes how your body responds to carbs all the way at dinner time. There was even a study published in the journal Nutrition where they modeled this out. For 7 days, they had subjects protein preload or not. The subjects that protein preloaded ended up having significantly more insulin responsiveness. So it wasn't like it just kept them satiated and they didn't eat as much and they lost weight. No, it actually changed the insulin dynamics, so they were able to improve their insulin resistance independent of any caloric changes. It was all just about protein timing. So again, big takeaway there. Get that protein in early on. Now let's move into the third tool you can have in your toolbox, which is strategic use of fermented foods or vinegar prior to your meals. Check this out. This is wild. There's a study published in Diabetes Care. They gave them 20 grams, that's like a thimble, of apple cider vinegar prior to a moderate carbohydrate meal. People that were insulin resistant ended up seeing a 34% improvement in insulin sensitivity just by having the apple cider vinegar with the meal. People that were legit type 2 diabetic had a 19% improvement in insulin sensitivity at that very meal. We're talking something almost immediate. Basically, the acetic acid that's in that apple cider vinegar is acting in a way like a metformin. It is actually taking the carbohydrates and allowing them to go into glycogen storage easier. It's allocating the carbohydrates into the muscle rather than just floating around aimlessly through the bloodstream causing potential damage. But also slows the digestive breakdown of the carbohydrates, so you get a slower release of those carbs. And you're also decreasing the carbohydrate breakdown from the muscle. So all in all, you have a three-way mechanism that's making it so that you have a much better response with that meal that has the vinegar or fermented food with it than you would otherwise. This could be some of the lowest hanging fruit to help improve insulin resistance. And just to add icing on the cake with all of this, within your respective meals, remember that food order does matter too. If you have your protein first, your fiber second, and then everything else last, that alone can make a 37 to 50% difference in your glucose spikes with that meal, and that can tremendously affect insulin resistance. The bottom line is that now you know that your timing matters and the meal you eat with breakfast affects your lunch much, much more. My challenge to you is with your next meal, I want you to eat your protein first, your fiber and fat second, and your carbohydrates last. But additionally, tomorrow when you get up in the morning, I want you to go above and beyond to protein load in the morning. Even if that means you're borrowing from lunch and putting it with breakfast. Protein load and see how much better you feel throughout the course of the day. So now we know that timing and order is important, but what about nutrient density? Because that really matters. Like, how much bang for the buck are you getting out of your food itself? Well, fortunately, I have a video that breaks down the top nutrient-dense foods that you can add to your diet without adding a bunch of calories. So that video is right here. You can check them out. And as always, get locked here on my channel.